Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 11th, 2016. Time for yet another show. Time marches on, despite my best efforts. It's been a week, and it's only Tuesday. This is getting tougher. Each passing day, just more and more difficult to tolerate, really. I can't wait for this election to be over. No one, I don't think, wants to stretch this one out any longer than it has to go. I don't know, man. It's starting to wear on me, I guess, and in more than one way. At any rate, lots of stories going on today. Greg has been not tweeting, but texting, I guess, texting up a storm, and has sent us all sorts of fun and interesting entries for today. We'll go over his roundup of the news and the latest polling and all of that in just a few minutes. Today being Tuesday, let's see, a little housekeeping for the week. Wednesday tomorrow, no live show tomorrow. However, I have taped a program for tomorrow, and it's singular in focus. I think I probably would have made it singular in focus had I done it consciously, but I didn't. I did it unconsciously, and I was unconscious for most of the recording, by the way. And it's well worth listening. I've been promoting this thing not all week, for a couple of days. Anyway, for over the weekend, when the news dropped of the what we're calling the tapes, but there are several different installments of tapes, and there's more to come, I am sure. But Donald Trump's, of course, we're talking about the tapes from the which show were they on at the time? Access Hollywood. Who would have thought Access Hollywood would have been in the news so often for Donald Trump? And I guess twice. I still say, well, who would have guessed that would have made two appearances? And hardly anyone noticed the first one anyway. So the tapes are creating a stir, obviously, and they've led me to read the piece I've been talking about, and that has been featured as a top recommended diary for quite some time over at Daily Kos, and discussing the nature of Donald Trump's ownership of Trump model management, and also, of course, his beauty pageants. We all knew about the trafficking, of course, is the title that's used here, The Untold Story of Trump Model Management, Part 1. In case you found the piece too long to read, although, again, I do think it's a fascinating piece and it's kind of hard to put down, but if you found yourself limited in your time, or in some cases your patience for such a topic, I did it for you books on tape style. Not really books on tape style. That is, I keep interrupting and discussing things, but I have one piece of background information that I added to the stack, and then we jumped right in, and basically that ate up about those 2 hours. So an intensive look at this piece, at the story it's trying to weave together. No word yet on whether the second entry is on its way anytime soon, but I imagine so. She seemed to be hard at work at putting this together, did our author, who goes by the Daily Kos handle of Swedish Jewfish. Don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I don't ask these questions anymore. And, I'm just checking now while I'm gabbing about this, just to make sure that I haven't missed entry number 2, just in case. There was no release date set on this thing. But, well, of course, now it wants me to be in mobile Daily Kos, which is not where I want to be because I'm using the desktop for this. Give me the full screen here, please. And anyway, I'll check it out for you and make sure that we haven't missed anything. And as much as I can't wait for this second installment to come out. I hope it doesn't come out today because that'll make tomorrow seem like the story is a little bit behind the times. Anyway, fascinating one. And really a build-up in pocket this past week or so of stories related to this one. It seems to me like another one of those stories. There's a lot to this. And maybe we'll even spend some time setting some of this up today. But it seems to me that every time I turn around, I'm bumping into, maybe it's the contestants in this election that have something to do with it. I would guess so. A lot of times the news in an election is driven by the two people contesting the election. But I seem to be bumping into, well, sex ring and sex trafficking stories wherever I go. Of course, the right wing has literally many people have made a living for decades making allegations like that about Bill Clinton. And, well, some of the allegations that they made about Bill Clinton turned out to be true. So you can't discount these things entirely. But what is really strange is it just seems like another one of those stories that it's really a deflating thing to talk about first thing in the morning, I think, to find out how much of the world that you thought was being run by people of merit and accomplishment. And sometimes they are people of merit and accomplishment, but a lot of things seem to run on these weird relationships. And that was always true, I guess. The world runs on weird relationships. It always did. And, of course, the world runs on sex, and it always did. That's how we're all here. So I guess there's some going on. Despite all evidence, there seems to be plenty of it to go around. But, you know, the frequency with which I'm running into the stories about just the entire celebrity world, everyone you know, everyone who's a household name seems to be wrapped up in one or another, and sometimes all of these things. It's an incredible network, and I guess, you know, it stands to reason. Before we get too far into conspiracy theory, I guess if the universe is, well, let's talk about people who are well known, and then cross that with the universe of people who sometimes engage in sexual activity. It's going to be a pretty big overlap. Again, that's how we all got here. Not everybody is necessarily engaged in as much activity, or any in some cases, I guess, but or the same types, let's say. But I don't know. It's making me wonder, you know, whether it's worth it. Can you crack the top 10 just being a hard-working person who does normal stuff and then goes home at night? It's certainly possible. But it seems like, you know, when you crack those upper echelon, I don't know, other worlds appear to open up to you. People invite you to things, and then they talk about stuff when you get to those things. And some of those people are a little more forward than others. And I guess when you're a celebrity, you just tend to move in celebrity circles. And of course, there's an entire industry dedicated to keeping your circle separate from others. Not necessarily, though there's certainly the circle of exclusivism and elitism, but there's also just the basic industry of, I need security because weirdos might come up and try to throw, whatever. Throw blood on me if I'm wearing fur. Throw a pie at me if they're just jokesters. Throw a bomb at me if they're terrorists, whatever. Throw a subpoena to pay child support if you're, let's say, Joe Walsh. Something like that. But the industry that surrounds the fame industry, I guess, keeps things insular. And if you're caught up in that world and you turn for support to others as a support group who are also living in that world, then I guess these things are going to develop on their own naturally. But, well, we'll talk more about that, and actually exclusively about that, in the context of Donald Trump tomorrow. Today, in the context of Donald Trump, we might talk about, is he going to lose? Greg, what do you think?
I think he's already lost.
Okay, good. So when do we start with the toast stuff?
Well, you know, we need maybe Friday.
Okay.
And here's the reasoning. Okay, Steve Cosala over at Mass Inc. polling group in WBUR does a real good job. I think it's the last thing I have for you on my Skype list here is a picture he tweets and puts together these really nice charts of what happened after the debates. For the first debate, he had 7 or 8 different polls listed, maybe as many as 9, that showed that Clinton won the first debate. Now he's doing it for the second debate. There aren't as many polls yet. But Politico Morning Consult had Trump 28, Clinton 42, CNN ORC, the snap poll we talked about on the air, 34 Trump, 57 Clinton, and YouGov 42-47 Clinton. So those are the 3 polls we have that specifically look at outcome. The Politico Morning Consult one is, I think, the new one. And because the debate was Sunday night, we also have a couple of major polls out. One was PRRI Atlantic, and another, since our show yesterday, now seems like old news, but it came out yesterday morning after the show, was the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. And they were post-tapes, but pre-debate. Okay. So if the debate was Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for sampling, Thursday, Friday are when you're going to start seeing results of the polls post-debate. These polls say Clinton won the debate, putting the lie to the idea that, Trump stanched the bleeding because he did so well, which is kind of dumb.
Well,
what kind of bleeding were we talking about? Well, the NBC Wall Street Journal poll has Clinton up in the head-to-head by 14 and in the four-way by 11. And the new, this morning, Atlantic PRRI poll also has a pretty massive lead for her. It's a double-digit advantage. It's 11 after being locked into dead heat 2 weeks ago. And the headline is Independents and Women Bail on Trump, giving Clinton a double-digit lead. So that's 49-38.
Okay.
2 weeks ago it was 43-43.
Yeah. Well, okay, that is a little toasty, isn't it? Meanwhile, of course, par for the course, he's saying this morning, every poll shows I won the debate.
Yeah, the Drudge, I can click as many times as I want, especially if I have a bot doing it for me. Made in Russia poll. And then there's the Time poll, which is also the same thing, online, click, 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 let's Russians do it for me poll. I mean, he's winning those. Because nobody bothers, as we used to say in the old days, remember, freeping the polls?
Yes.
We don't do that.
No. It's not worth it.
So scientific polls, it's not worth it, right? Exactly. So anyway, here's the progression on the Atlantic PRRI poll. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump tied at 43 on September 22 through 25. Then you have the first debate, and Clinton takes a lead, 47-41, and then you have the tapes, and now it's 49-38. So basically, if Trump is in 38% territory, we're talking about a loss worse than McGovern's in 1972. Oh. And I just want to mention, I was 18 in 1972. It was my first election. It was the first election nationally that I volunteered for. I had volunteered for Dick Ottinger as a teenager prior to that, who was a local congressman running for Senate in New York State. And in 72, I happened to be living because I was going to school, I was living in Massachusetts. So, the bumper stickers there, the 2 great bumper stickers from that era, were, don't blame me, I'm from Massachusetts, because we were the only state that didn't vote for Nixon. and the other one, which was much better, was the hockey one, extolling Phil Esposito, who scored a lot of points for the Boston Bruins, and the sticker said, Jesus saves, Esposito puts in the rebound. and that was everybody's favorite bumper sticker.
All right, I'm sure.
But that was from that era. The point I'm trying to make is that unless you've been in a crushing loss in a campaign setting, you have no idea how bad it is.
Yeah, I guess so.
And these guys don't, because they've never done a campaign before.
That's true. Not of any kind. In many cases, neither have any of the operatives.
Right. And so part of Trump's major problems and long list, and certainly not at the top of the list, but part of his problem is he has no clue how to lose. Which, by the way, he's proving every morning.
That's true. If you take his word for it, he's never done it.
Yes.
So.
He's about to. What happens? Does he have the psychological makeup to deal with a crushing loss? What do you think?
Stamina. No.
No. And so what does he do? He lashes out and blames everybody. It's got to be Paul Ryan's fault. It's got to be the media's fault. It's got to be Kellyanne Conway's fault. It's got to be Steve Bannon's fault. So basically, I think it's sinking in that he's losing, although the crushing nature of it isn't. He still has his supporters who are just getting more and more desperate. We don't really know. He's come back so often. We don't know if this is the end of it. It's way too early to say. There's only like 10 hours left, and it's way too early to say. I'm still waiting for the only poll that matters is on Election Day. That's about the only thing that's missing.
Yes,
but once we get the post-debate polls in and they can't claim that changed everything and stopped the bleeding, that's when the toast pictures start getting posted.
Okay. Well, all right. That gives us a target to
Not
wait
that I
for.
don't have them ready.
Right. We're all making toast. We can still do that.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's what's going on. So you got to have those polls. There's a new one out from Morning Consult and Politico this morning with a 42-37 lead, with Johnson at 10 and Stein at 3. And in the two-way, Clinton's lead is 5 points, 46-41. The funny thing is, if you actually look, if you want to bother, looking at online polls, Economist YouGov has 5, and Morning Consult has 5, and even the LA Times Weird poll, which is online, is down to Trump plus 2. And on the other hand, you have NBC Wall Street Journal poll, which is Clinton 14, and you have Atlantic PRRI, which is Clinton 11. And what I'm saying is the online polls seem to be incredibly steady. They only move a point or 2 or 3. Even the NBC News SurveyMonkey poll is Clinton plus 7. It, ticked up a couple of points. Whereas when you call people and talk to them on the phone, the swings are like, this is double what it was the last time in each iteration of the polls, the Atlantic and the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. So they're more volatile. And I guess the question on the table is, which set of polls is right? Which is a better polling method? Because it may be that the online polls, and by that I don't mean Drudge and Time and the bot freaked polls, but I mean the actual online panel surveys, etc., may be underestimating Clinton's lead by a few points. We've seen that throughout the entire campaign. Sometimes it's closer than other times. Harry Enton looked at it, and sometimes it's not that big. Other times it seems to be a little bigger. But that's one of the weird things about looking at this. Another thing that's a little weird looking at this is when you look at the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, has to be considered still the gold standard of national media polling, along with Van Seltzer for different reasons. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll looks at, and this is on, what page is this? Page 6. I did send you the PDF, and I think I even sent you a screenshot of it way at the top there. If the next election for president were held today, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Gary Johnson, and Jill Stein, who would you vote for? The registered voters say Donald Trump 35, Hillary Clinton 45. It's a 10-point lead. And the likely voters in this poll, which has been consistent throughout this poll, is actually a larger lead for Clinton, 35-46.
All right.
Very unusual. In other polls, and we've mentioned the Reuters wacko online poll before, it's double. I mean, there was one edition where Reuters had the registered voters with an 11-point Clinton lead and the likely voters with a 3 or 4 point Clinton lead. So the vast differences between registered and likely voters in polls is one of the features that we've been seeing. Everybody picks a different likely voter model, but the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, which tends to get it right, not only doesn't have Clinton's lead vanishing very much when you go from RV to LV, it actually grows a tad, which is a head scratcher.
That's a new one.
It is, and yet it's been true this entire cycle. Maybe they've modeled the electorate better.
Could be. Well, yeah. I mean, if it was an aberration for one or two polling, I don't know what you call them, polling cycles, but
yes, well, exactly. But it was true in August, September. August they were still doing RVs. They went in September. RVs 37-42, LVs 37-43 for Clinton, and now it's 35-45 versus 35-46. So every time they did it for these last two cycles here, they really haven't found very much difference. Let's just put it that way, between the RVs and the LVs. So just one of those things to chalk up and say, that's interesting. I don't have it at my fingertips here, but by memory, I think that Clinton had a negative 10, 40 versus 50, whereas Trump's was a negative 34. So he was 29.63. And that's actually a significant difference. His negatives are 3 times hers. Again, this is pre-debate. So if you're a Trump supporter, you're going to cling to the idea like you cling to guns and religion in a small town. Sure. Remember that one? It was going to change the election. If you're going to cling to the idea that the second debate changed everything, you'd say, oh, well, this doesn't really count. Actually, what it turns out is that this is a early release. They're still in the field polling. And then I think we're going to get another version or iteration of this a little bit later after the second debate. So we'll be able to see what kind of difference it made. And that's really kind of a cool thing to do.
Okay. Yes. Well, we'll be able to compare before and after and get some kind of an idea. That would be very interesting. And we're not seeing that sort of difference in other polls, the LVRV thing.
Not to that extent. Okay. I mean, some of the polls just don't show that much a difference, and some of them do. But again, this is such a quality poll. It's really worth looking at and kind of studying that. And I think you can learn a whole lot more from an NBC Wall Street Journal poll than you can from a Q poll, from a Quinnipiac poll.
Are they discussing, or do they wait until after the election to discuss the really nitty-gritty details of their methodology, or is that something
they wait? They do it after the election. Occasionally, some of the pollsters will be on TV and they'll talk about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But I guess that's sort of it's a proprietary thing, so
it's what Armando calls the special sauce, secret sauce.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. On one hand, I can understand why they want to hold their cards close, and on the other hand, you kind of want more of the polling industry to evaluate and maybe try that model. Although I guess you can't change your modeling in the middle anyway.
But it's all pretty transparent. All you have to do is locate it, which is not easy to find. But just tell me how many white people are voting, and tell me how many people of color are voting, and then I'll understand why your LV model is different than somebody else's LV model.
Well, it's not hidden. It's just not quite as openly discussed. But I think that's probably
as much a programming choice
as anything else. It's certainly, you put a pollster on TV for 3 minutes, it can't be that deep into the methodology, or you won't get the results that you
right. Exactly. You'll never get the guy on TV again.
Yeah, well, that may be true.
All right. Other stories worth talking about here. So what happened yesterday? Friday we had the release of the tapes. Lots of rumors about whether or not there's more tapes. Billy Bush is gone for the moment. Probably never to come back. I think there was a revolt of female staff. Meanwhile, there's a revolt of GOP staff. And the GOPers who work for the RNC and the Paul Ryan wing of the party, which according to the polls is about a third of the party, don't want to have anything to do with Trump. And the 2/3, which are the Trump part of the party, don't want to have anything to do with Paul Ryan. So now they're in open warfare with each other. And basically Trump is threatening, including with tweets, to say, we don't need Ryan, we don't want Ryan, we'll do this on our own. You guys can, go jump off a cliff, go walk a plank, we don't care. And if that takes the House and Senate down with you, we don't care about that either. And so that's what's happening right now. We are watching the dissolution of the Republican Party as we know it. The Civil War we predicted a few years ago is here. It's not even waiting till after the election, which is, of course, going to wind up with a Trump loss. But the question on the table is Senate and House, of course, and we don't know that answer yet. One of the things that was in the Wall Street Journal poll is a +7 for Democrats wanting to change Congress. And if it gets to be 8, 9, or even 10, then the House is gone.
All right. Yeah. And I guess to that end, I'll have to check in. Maybe next week we can check in again with the NCEC guys and Mark Kirsch, and they've got a new prediction window out. And it's starting to look like something may really happen. We might see that 10, 15 seat swing as a serious possibility, up to 20, as what they're saying, and they're usually relatively conservative about these things.
Right. So we'll see what they have to say. That's the National Committee for an Effective Congress, NCEC.
Yeah.
And we'll see what they have to say about it. Right now they say expect Democrats to win 10 to 20 of the House seats, but that might change. Now, let's change gears just slightly, but stick with the same theme. Fascinating article by Francis Wilkinson in Bloomberg View. And I think that's about midway down. I just want to make sure. Yeah, it's right underneath the American flag. I have an Ana Navarro quote here. And first time ever, Latin builders in Miami endorse a Democrat. Maybe Trump shouldn't have stiffed those Doral contractors. And there is a story there with from the Wall Street Journal with a big American flag and Hillary in the front of that. But below that, it says Trump vanquished his rivals for the GOP's soul.
Ah, okay. Let's open that.
So open that one, and that's kind of interesting. I'll just read you a Ari Melber quote while we're doing this. Trump's pledge to jail Clinton, which Pence just defended today, was literally one of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon.
Yeah, right, exactly. So he's starting out on a good footing. He's already committing his impeachable crimes.
Right, great, before he even gets there. All right, so Trump vanquished his rivals for the GOP's soul. There are two possible explanations for Donald Trump's debate performance Sunday night. The first, it was one of Trump's regular releases of bile, albeit a high-volume one. It's true that the most unpopular presidential candidate in the history of polling did little in the debate to make himself more likable, and much to frighten voters who are not already in the camp. It was a greatest hits compilation of every unhinged fantasy from Trump's damaged psyche, which is one of the reasons I enjoyed so much hearing Joe Scarborough and others say he won the debate.
Yes.
What does that mean, that he won the debate? Firstly, he lost the debate. You can look at the polls and see that. Secondly, if you think that sort of stuff is winning, throwing Clinton in jail plus releasing all the other weird stuff, you think that is winning? What is wrong with you? They really are a basket of deplorables. There's no apology needed for that comment. How many of them? Well, 2/3, 1/3, based on the polls. But the second explanation for his performance... That should jeopardize his grip on the time slot, to be honest, if they had somebody... if MSNBC would ever give up on him, which they won't. Yeah. But the second explanation for his performance is that his Rage Festival managed to be both cathartic and strategic, because Trump's psyche looks remarkably like a psychographic map of the Republican base. Trump was shaky as the debate began, standing behind a chair in the opening moments... Actually, forgive me, viewers, but it looked like he was trying to hump it.
Yes, that was weird.
Really. As he sought a barrier to protect him from the onslaught, Clinton, however, failed to pounce. I hate when they use that word. I find notions he intentionally held back in order to keep her damaged opponent from collapsing wrong-headed. The collapse of Trump would ensure her victory. A damaged, raging Trump is highly unlikely to prevail, but it's not impossible. Her restraint allowed Trump to build up confidence and regenerate the vitriol that powers his performance. He's shown the capacity to regulate himself, at least partially, when absolutely necessary. At the second debate, though, he pushed beyond even the distant boundaries he has observed in the past. In his most frightening attack, Trump promised to jail Hillary Clinton. If the justice system and the political system exonerated Clinton of wrongdoing, then both must be swept aside in favor of a purer form of vengeance. Trump's dictatorial prerogatives. Yes. This was not the way to go if Trump wants to defeat Clinton. But what if he... and more importantly, his ambitious campaign chief, Steve Bannon. Remember, he's running the campaign, not Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne is just there to make the words pretty and go on TV. Who was, and I don't mean she's using her looks to do that, I mean she's a wordsmith like Frank Luntz, who prettifies the words so that they don't mean quite the same thing that they actually mean. Steve Bannon, who was photographed smiling at the pre-debate event with women accusing Bill Clinton of assault, are willing to take longer odds on winning the 2016 election in order to have better odds on retaining control of the GOP base. The base hates the party leadership. That's in full display right now, by the way, which has never shown the willingness to act on the ugly propaganda, including birtherism, that the leadership once found so amusing and beneficial. Did Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell not hear the chance of lock her up at Trump's convention? Did they not see the mob demanding so much more than it's been given? Trump's debate performance assured the base he intends to realize its darkest fantasies. This will keep him securely at the top of the ticket. GOP leaders can't afford to cut Trump loose. His voters will go with him. We talked about this yesterday. What does Kelly Ayotte do? Does she want the 2/3 or the 1/3? It doesn't matter. She can't win a majority without either, and they hate each other, so she's not getting both. And that's true for every one of the swing state guys. It also means that Trump can keep the base after the election, and that's really the point of all of this. So Trump is transforming the GOP into the party of lock her up, and what are the implications of that? I ask my listening audience right now.
Also the party of locker room.
Yeah. November's a short horizon. There's money and much more to be made from the GOP's soul. It's now clearer than ever Trump and Bannon intend to own it. And here's a companion piece, just because of weird. This is from Ezra Klein from Vox. Trump ally Alex Jones thinks Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are literally demons from hell.
Yes.
You know, brimstone, smelling like brimstone and all, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, like Hugo Chavez said once.
Yeah. Alex Jones said, Hillary is not even the same universe of lesser evils. She's an abject, psychopathic demon from hell that as soon as she gets into power is going to destroy the planet. There are dozens of videos and photos of Obama having flies land on him indoors at all times of year, and he'll be next to 100 people and no one has flies on them. Hillary, I mean, I was told by people around her she thinks she's demon-possessed, okay? I'm telling you, she's a demon. Imagine how bad she smells. I'm told her and Obama just stink. You can't wash the evil off me. This is Alex Jones talking. Told that there's a rotten smell around Hillary. I'm not kidding. People say, folks, I've been told this by high-up folks. They say, listen, Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. I've talked to people that are in protective details. They're scared of her. And they say, listen, she's a frickin' demon and she stinks and so does Obama. I go, like what? And they say sulfur. They smell like hell.
Yes.
That's,
many people are saying this.
Yeah, many people are saying this. Kind of unique.
Yeah, Alex.
But these are the people advising his campaign.
Yeah. Right, and it's not like he's not listening either. He came right out and said, "Oh yeah, the devil." That's great.
Anyway, so where are we at with the prediction market? Since we're
okay.
talking about nutcases, let's talk about a little reality here, just to ground ourselves, please. So we have New York Times upshot 87% chance of winning for Clinton, 538 gloomy, 538 has an 83%. Daily Kos is now up to 95%. We used to be the worst and slowest of the come around eventuallys. Right. Huffington Post is 88. They used to be the most optimistic. PredictWise Markets 88. That's climbing a point every day. And notice that's post-debate. She went up post-debate. So we'll see about those polls. And the Sam Wang site has 97%. So only a 3% chance of Trump winning. So if you're going to talk about toast, now's the time to start toasting it.
Yes.
Getting ready to show people what your culinary efforts show.
It doesn't take much, thankfully.
Yeah, that's something even I can make, so there you have it.
While you were telling me about how terrible Hillary Clinton smells, I was watching on Twitter one of the many GIFs of the debate went by, and Donald Trump can't seem to get enough of her scent. He's following her around the stage, standing up close. That was a big topic of discussion, I guess. Also yesterday, I don't know, did we discuss the fact that he was following around and just sort of standing?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of creepy, yes. and the sniffing plus the following are just all really weird. If you talk about Al Gore trying to intimidate George W. Bush, all I can say is that as the Atlantic article says, independents and women are leaving him in droves.
And I was looking at it though too. It's funny that. I don't know what it looked like live, and somebody did make the good point that television exaggerates distance, and even these very close-looking pictures were extremely close live. But then I don't know. I guess it
shrinks it. You mean because it makes it look like he's standing directly over her when in fact it might have been a foot or two. In between them.
It actually,
or the other way around.
The other way around. The pictures looked pretty close, but if you're live, if you've ever been inside of a TV studio or TV set, it's surprising how small the space really is, and how close you really have to be to look as close as he looked on screen is pretty remarkable. Like. A foot or less. Yeah, no, he was obnoxiously attempting to intimidate, and that's the other funny thing about, he won the debate. Why? Because you think it's great that he was trying to intimidate her? He stood near her. I found that very interesting. She was unintimidatable. Yeah, I mean, I get the idea that, I could see where that could possibly intimidate people, but I mean, it was so ineffectual visually. And she doesn't even hardly notice that he's there. And he's, so what? He comes up and stands behind her and squints. And people are like, what is that? But it's like that Bush-Gore time that happened. If you try to do that and you fail, it's like 1,000% fail. You might as well have when you didn't do it at all. On for that one. That's one of those where if you take a shot at the king, you better not miss. Yeah. Well, that was pretty lame. And by the way, if she smells like sulfur, I don't know what he's doing creeping up behind her and sniffing. Why didn't you just light a match and prove it, That's true. Guy's a coward. Science. But,
anyway, so
I wouldn't
you have
sniff
all
that
of
much.
that, and it's just the big picture is that he's just making every possible thing worse, and I think the thing to do now is to watch the crack up of the Republican Party and interpret it in that fashion. I'm still of the opinion that, the fact that she's leading doesn't matter. You have to work twice as hard because it's really important that she wins by a lot. And there's a variety of reasons for that, including, saving democracy as we know it. But pick your own reason.
Yeah. I mean, the size of the vote now, the popular vote will matter a great deal. Not that he won't claim that it's just that much more rigged, but it just looks that much dumber when you do it.
Yeah, well, do it for Arizona. Do it for Georgia. Do it for Texas. Do it for Utah. I mean, those are the states that are in play this week that weren't in play last week, so let's see what happens.
All right.
Before I go, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Yes, it's not a show tomorrow, and yes, I'm very much looking forward to you listening to you talk about that modeling agency scam. But actually some people, because Abby, the doorbell dog, has been so active this week, wanted some pictures of her. So I did send them to you, and I hope they get posted later on when we do the Scott Anderson-driven summary of the show. She's really a very nice dog who I threw outside today so we could talk without interruption.
It's cold today, too, but
she doesn't
bracing and refreshing for a dog.
She'll just catch a couple of chipmunks and squirrels, which, by the way, she's very good at.
Yeah, okay. Well, they run with their tails up.
Well, she is as fast as lightning, so, when she gets in hunting mode, it's just like you're doomed.
Okay.
The thing I was really worried about is not her catching a squirrel, which she does on occasion, and not catching chipmunks, which she does frequently. I'm afraid she's going to come in with a deer in her mouth.
Well,
because I'm the one, my wife always sends me out. You're the one that has to go get that out of her mouth. I'm not touching that. That's your job.
Deer.
So I got to put a glove on and then get that deer out of her mouth and then throw it in the woods. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, so it's not going to let you either.
I know. I told you my deer story from Newtown when I first moved here, right?
Yeah, I believe you did, but yeah, let's hear it again just to refresh my memory and others.
Well, I had just moved here from New York City, so this is like Green Acres.
Yes.
We bought the Haney place and then we moved to town, and everybody's rural and we're urban. And I can't figure out how come when you lose power, you also lose water, because that doesn't happen in New York City. We got these big, water tanks on the top of the buildings. And I'm driving maybe 25, 30 miles an hour. I'm maybe a mile, maybe a half a mile from my home. First couple of weeks I was in town. And this deer, about this time of year, jumps out of the side of the road, runs right in front of my car, and I hit it, but not, enough to total the car or anything like that. It wasn't going that fast. And the deer looks at me and then runs off to the side of the road and then falls down. And I didn't know what to do. I stopped the car, obviously, and I looked at the deer and I looked at my car as a tiny little, bumper scratch. And I said, maybe I should just report this in case there's more damage that I could see. And, at least I'll have an insurance record of this, that I'm not making it up. So I called the Newtown police and I said, listen, I'm on this road here and I just hit a deer. And they said, just now? And I said, yeah. And they said, we'll be right there. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is like such a friendly town. You tell people and they show up right away. And, And so, maybe 5 minutes later, I'm standing outside the car and cop car drives up and cop comes out and says, so where's the deer? And I said, over there, and pointed to the side of the road. And he said, you just did it now. It's fresh. And I said, yeah. He said, great. Picks up the deer, throws it in the back seat, drives off. And I'm still standing in front of the car, scratching my head. So, am I supposed to wait for him? I stay? Do I go? Do I stay or do I go? What's going on? So I call the station again and said, listen, I called the guy and you just came and took the deer and I didn't even get to what am I supposed to do now? And the dispatcher said, you're the guy that called about the deer? Thank you so much. I said, thank you for what? And I said, well, venison. We've got dinner tonight. We were afraid you were going to call the game warden or somebody else. So thanks for thinking of us. Take care. Hangs up.
That's a good, oh shoot. So maybe that's what he does for the Palm Beach police down there as Trump just goes around hitting deers with, well, there's no deer, I don't think.
Right. I want to give you, an idea of adventures in a small town. Yeah, and if you're a city kid.
Thanks for thinking of us.
and you're walking into this, it's like, where am I? What have I done?
That is funny. Yeah, I mean, I certainly get the picture, but yeah, that's funny how excited they were about it.
Yeah, about me? Ha! You're from New York City. Stay in the car. It's your problem. We just want the deer.
Funny. Well,
did they even look at the car? No. Did they look at me? No. Not their interest.
Wow.
Fresh venison.
All right.
So, that's what happens this time of year. And again, Newtown, people hunt. People hunt with bow and arrow. People hunt with guns. It's a rural town, lots of farms.
Baseball bats, ladders.
It's that kind of place, so it's just always interesting when city comes to country comes to city, and this rural-urban split that we often talk about in terms of what you see in the elections, very real to me. I see it here.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. I guess next time you don't have to call. You should just bring one of those big, triangle dinner bells with you and just ring that whenever you hit a deer.
Next time I'm calling the game warden. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, you just got to spread it around a little bit. They eat them too.
Well, if they're not going to help me with the car, what's the difference?
Yeah, right.
Might as well call them.
Right.
Anyway, that's my roundup from Newtown, Connecticut today. Take care. Thanks so much. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, who is not toast, even if Donald Trump is. And we will not be back tomorrow because he won't be on live, but there will be a show for you to listen to. Yes. There will be a live show after this, so David will continue for the next hour and some minutes. We'll be back Thursday, right?
Yeah.
We will be back Thursday.
We will, sure.
We will. And by then, maybe we'll start to get some post-debate polls out, and we can really see what's going on. Take care, and I'll talk to you Thursday.
All right. Thanks very much. You have a good day yourself, and we'll be back.
Yeah, I got to go fetch the doorbell because she's still outside. Take care.
Okay, very good. See what she's got in her mouth.
Yeah.
And do share. Bring enough for everybody. Okay, well, let's see. What was I going to do? Oh, yes, I was going to look up. I never did get around to finding out whether the second installment of the story came out, although really, honestly, I don't know that I was I don't know that I'd be able to do anything with it yet anyway. But I do want to digest. I'm curious. I just want to know if this thing is out. But I will have to. I'll do that searching later on, and we'll move on instead with the rest of the day's agenda. I want to take a look at the picture of the dog, though, if we can do that. I saw one tweeted yesterday. Was it? Where do we see that one happen? Darwin Darko, who's been a contributor for us in the past, actually asked for a photo from Greg, and he sent one to him via Twitter, but we will include, I'll have to download these shots. I haven't opened them yet. Let me take a look. I'm just curious about that. Where are they? Probably up at the top, right? The media received. It's a weird thing the way Skype chat handles pictures. You click on them. They don't show you the picture. You have to click on a link, and then you got to log in to Skype, even though you're doing it from Skype. I really can't figure out why that has to happen. So there's a little bit of delay. Oh, there she is. Okay. Yesterday, let's see, on Twitter, it was a shot of Abby on the couch, and let's see, here's a standing shot. So there's a whole portfolio here. Is this the couch shot, the other one? No. Okay, on the rug. So there you go. Looks like, yeah, she does look like a quick little pup. I'm sure she's picking up all sorts of friendly neighborhood creatures and bringing them inside. Okay, well, we'll share those with you in the afternoon roundup post and move on from here. Let me just take a quick look around over at Ye Old Front Page, see what's being discussed there. And, oh, yes, we did forget this morning to read Bill's morning kickoff tweet. Of course, by now you know that Daily Kos Radio is live. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't start over just for the sake of the tweet. But, yeah, I'll reiterate the promise. I do promise no locker room talk from me, but watch out for the occasional towel snap. I was good at that. Rat tails, as we called them in camp, a very special kind of towel snap. It sounds a little more sinister than it really is, but just you get there's an expertise to the way you roll the towel, and not everybody does roll the towel. Some people just hold a corner and sort of snap it at you. But if you put the thing down and roll it up, but roll it crooked. Roll it like Crooked Hillary. You roll it a little bit off center so that it's like rolling like a croissant is the way it sort of comes out. Although very thick on one end and a thin down at the other end, like a rat tail. But it's a much worse. It hurts a lot more. And you can do a lot more damage to people. And when you're a kid, for some reason, that's super thrilling. Hooray, I can hurt my friends. It's very threatening. That's bad news in a locker room. But I don't think I ever heard anybody say anything like that. Certainly not in a camp locker room. It would have confused the kids. What? Doesn't make any sense. I don't know what you're talking about. I hope. Anyway, let's see. Front page news over at Daily Kos. Nice roundup. Of course, I'm looking first up at the top here is the Daily Kos Elections Morning Digest. 2 Democrats show how to make Republicans pay a price for supporting Trump. That would be let's see, I guess up at the top here, New Hampshire Senate race and Texas 23rd District. The two, I guess, among the 2 most aggressive in coming out to use the tape footage directly against candidates down ballot. I've seen some rather aggressive moves in that regard. Here's the second piece here. I guess this is sort of the order of the day in terms of what's leading edge of political junkie conversation. Mark Sumner, again, with a piece this time entitled From Russian Intelligence to Trump's Lips in Less Than a Day. This is sort of a controversial take on, even on the left. And there's the same split as always, really, between, I guess, I don't know how we'll characterize it here, but, well, the Hillary Clinton camp, which admittedly, and I think with good reason, is willing to believe more about, or more of the accusations about the connections between the Trump campaign and Russian interests, if not necessarily the government of Russia. I don't know. And so, and then a split with, it's an odd mix of Bernie Sanders fans, Bernie Sanders diehards in particular, and then people who either were never for any Democrat of any kind or are third party supporters or are just more cynical and sometimes more skeptical. And I brought this controversy up because I do think that there's pretty healthy room for skepticism. It worries me a little bit that we run away so quickly with the idea that, that there are dark Russian forces behind everything. It sounds too familiar and in some cases too easy. But I guess what's the hot news today is that Kurt Eichenwald, who has done an admirable job nailing Trump and the Trump campaign on a number of fronts, now has a piece out claiming, and I did put it away as I recall. Yeah, here it is. I'll jump right in with that, and then maybe I'll go back to Mark's, or maybe I should quick scan Mark's and see where he is on all of that. Why don't I'll start with Mark. From Russian intelligence to Trump's lips in less than a day. That's the heart of the accusation here. Illustrated, by the way, with one of the deplorables who became very famous by wearing, I don't know if this is a T-shirt of his own design. You've likely seen it by now. I have not seen anybody else wearing it, but this guy did. And it doesn't rhyme, and I can't read it to you. But anyway, yeah, I'm a little disappointed that I wonder if the guy thinks it rhymes. You will have seen it. Hillary, she's and unfortunately, this one contains the C word, which we can't read on the air. She's that. Vote for Trump. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you would think it would rhyme, and it's close, but it doesn't, and I wonder if he thinks it does, but That's the least important thing about it. Anyway, here's the point. He's deplorable, and here's the point of the story. How can you tell what Vladimir Putin is thinking? Listen to Donald Trump. The latest round of Russian intelligence hacks involved emails captured from the account of Hillary Clinton's election chair, John Podesta. Did Russian intelligence do it? I don't know. Everybody's trying to say that they did, but again, it makes sense to slow down and say, really? I mean, it could be. But I don't know. It could be a 400-pound guy on a bed in the basement or something somewhere. Did he say basement? I can't remember. Anyway, on Monday, portions of the latest WikiLeaks discharge were published by the Russian news service Sputnik, which I didn't even know. I've only in this cycle learned that there is a Russian news service, Sputnik. I'm like, that's the satellite. I know they named it after it, or maybe it means something in particular in Russian. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. I just noting for the record that these things are changing. And by the way, I'm noting for the record that Mark, like me, is having the same trouble. There's a weird formatting bug, it seems like, in the Daily Kos editor that sometimes cuts off a line prematurely and knocks it down to the next line, like the automatic carriage return from back in the days when there were things like carriages on typewriters. I got no other word for it, and they still use the C and CR for the coding for these things. Okay, anyway, you will have seen it, no doubt, in your own writing. So, what does Sputnik have to say? Portions of the latest WikiLeaks discharge published there, including what seemed to be a particularly damning sequence in an email. Emails! Give me some dramatic music. The emails. That doesn't sound a lot scary anymore. The email, this time from longtime advisor Sidney Blumenthal, or at least supposedly from Sidney Blumenthal. And Sidney Blumenthal really at this point deserves his own dramatic music. Or maybe he gets the evil, menacing. He's like a favorite boogeyman of the right and the left of the left who dislike Clinton. Nobody likes Sidney Blumenthal. I'm not really sure that I care that much, but okay. Anyway, the email was amazing, and I guess this is from Sputnik. Or no, I'm sorry. This is actually from the Newsweek piece from Kurt Eichenwald. He's the one that's saying it. It was amazing. And although you would think that, all right, well, that's the link up here anyway in Mark's piece. The email was amazing. It linked Boogeyman, Blumenthal, Podesta, and the topic of conservative political fever dreams, Benghazi. I got to tell you, it's getting to the point where I wouldn't fault you for saying liberal political fever dreams, Russia, except that it does seem like, well, I don't know. All I can tell you is authorities you're supposed to believe, or supposed to be comfortable believing, keep saying that all of this stuff originates from IP addresses in Russia. I don't know if it does. I don't know if it doesn't. I don't know why it wouldn't, though. And I don't know. So I'm a little bit more willing to accept it. But I'm just talking about grains of salt here. And you should keep some handy just in case. It usually clarifies the thinking. The email, he says, though, was amazing. It linked Blumenthal, Podesta, and Benghazi, which seems a little bit too convenient, and so I would take one of those grains of salt with that, right? If you saw that, if you were basically looking at an email from the boogeyman guy to second place boogeyman guy, with the exception of possibly George Soros or Saul Alinsky, who's dead, and it says, hey, do you guys want to do the Benghazi? Yeah, let's murder Americans. That's basically what we're talking about here. Eichenwald continues, this, it seemed, was the smoking gun, finally proving Clinton bore total responsibility for the terrorist attack on the American outpost in Libya in 2012. Here's how that email was reported in Sputnik, Mark reports, and here's the clip. In an email titled The Truth from Hillary's top confidant, Sidney Blumenthal, that already sounds unlikely, the advisor writing to undisclosed recipients said that, quote, one important point that has been universally acknowledged by 9 previous reports about Benghazi, the attack was almost certainly preventable in what may turn out to be the big October surprise from WikiLeaks' release of emails, it says released of emails, hacked from the account of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta. That seems a little stilted to you. I will remind you that this was Sputnik's writing. And by evening, Mark says, what had started the day with Russian intelligence had gone from them to WikiLeaks to Sputnik to Donald Trump at a rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And that is spelled Wilkes-Barre, like B-A-R-R-E, but it's Wilkes-Barre, they say, just as though it were one word. But I wonder did Trump pronounce that one correctly? So it's not hard to brief people in Wilkes-Barre. Trump spoke while holding a document in his hand. Oh my God, a document. I wonder if he put it on parchment and everything. He told the assembled crowd that it was an email from Blumenthal, whom he called Sleazy Sidney. That's very cute. The whole thing was a lie, says Mark, composed by carefully clipping the email to find the damning phrase. But Donald Trump did his job. He spread the message from Russian intelligence to his followers, where it can fester and do the most damage to America. Is there more, or are we talking about getting down to the comments? Yeah, here we go. He's now admitting this is Trump speaking about the so-called document. He's now admitting they could have done something about Benghazi, Trump said, dropping the document to the floor. This just came out a little while ago. The crowd booed and chanted, lock her up. And of course, Trump, who used to just grin smugly while the chant went on, is now joining in the promise that winning in November means putting his political opponent behind bars. The quote actually came, though, from an article by Newsweek author Kurt Eichenwald. Blumenthal had simply forwarded the article to Podesta, but Sputnik chopped away the identifying information and sliced down the remains to a sentence fragment that doesn't capture the tenor of the article. Then it put it out as Blumenthal's words. Russian intelligence to WikiLeaks, to Sputnik, to Donald Trump, to Trump's followers, all in just a few hours. The process was almost certainly greased by having Sputnik know in advance what the intelligence team had hacked for the latest WikiLeaks agitprop, but that's still impressively fast movement of talking points from Putin's desk to the Mohegan Sun Arena, not Mohican, but Mohegan in this case, same thing, outside Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Good mouthpiece, good Trump. Let's see. There's one more bit here at the end. The Russians have been attaining American emails and are now presenting complete misrepresentations of them, falsifying them in the hopes of setting off a cascade of events that might change the outcome of the presidential election. The big question, of course, is why are the Russians working so hard to damage Clinton and, in the process, aid Donald Trump? Is that from the Eichenwald piece? I've got that one close at hand here. He writes under the title of Dear Donald Trump and Putin, I am not Sidney Blumenthal. I'm going to have to turn off some auto-playing video here. If I can nip that in the bud, that would be great. Nope, can't, but I did manage to get rid of the volume. So it's video of Trump reading the document, I guess, and then shocked, dropping it on the floor. It is rather dangerous, of course, and the big problem with all of this is that even if it were, I guess if it really was an email like that, I guess the fact that without any kind of vetting at all, Donald Trump would just drop that at a rally, and then, of course, you can count on Donald Trump to do zero follow-up to find out, is this real? Does it matter? He just likes to say those things and drop it on his followers and let that fester. All right, so here's the piece here. It starts out with an update, I guess, or it says noting that it's updated. I am Sidney Blumenthal, says Kurt Eichenwald, which is an odd thing to say. At least that's what Vladimir Putin and somehow Donald Trump seem to believe. This is the backstory to all this, and that should raise concerns about not only Moscow's attempts to manipulate this election, but also how Trump came to push Russian disinformation to American voters. An email from Blumenthal, a confidant of Hillary Clinton, and a man, second only to George Soros, there you go, at the center of conservative conspiracy theories, that is true, turned up in the recent document dump by WikiLeaks, and that's really where we ought to be looking here. As to, what the agenda is here and why they're doing such a poor job with it at WikiLeaks. At a time when American intelligence believes Russian hackers are trying to interfere with the presidential election, records have been fed recently to WikiLeaks out of multiple organizations of the Democratic Party, raising concerns that the self-proclaimed whistleblower group, WikiLeaks, has become a tool of Putin's government. That would be an ironic thing for WikiLeaks. And I guess that's one of the things you have to look out for if you're in the document leaking business, and you want to encourage people to leak documents to you, no questions asked. Eventually there'll be an intelligence agency, somebody's intelligence agency, doesn't even matter whose, who will say, no questions asked. That's what we're looking for. And you'll get used by someone eventually. The question is, will everyone use you and it'll all come out in the wash, or will you find yourself caught out by the first one that uses you? I guess we're getting part of the answer now. Anyway, Eichenwald continues, but now that I have been brought into the whole mess and transformed into Blumenthal, there is even more proof that the Russians are not only orchestrating this act of cyber war, but also really, really dumb. How do you mean, Kurt? The evidence emerged thanks to the incompetence of Sputnik, the Russian online news and radio service established by the government-controlled news agency Rossiya Segodnya. Good luck with that pronunciation. I think I'm close. The documents that WikiLeaks has unloaded the recent unloading anyway, have been emails out of the account of John Podesta, the chairman of Clinton's election campaign. And of course, you'll remember that Donald Trump invited the Russians, or I'm sure he thought he was being playful, as that's his excuse. Please, Russia, hack their servers, hack the emails of the DNC or Hillary Clinton or whatever. Find me the 33,000 deleted emails. Or John Podesta's email, whichever comes first. Anyway, almost as soon as the pilfered documents emerged, this is where it gets a little dicey. Sputnik was all over them and rapidly found, or probably already knew about before the WikiLeaks dump, a purportedly incriminating email from Blumenthal. The email was amazing. We heard this part excerpted in Mark's piece. This is the one where it says it linked Boogeyman, Blumenthal, Podesta, and the topic of conservative political fever dreams, Benghazi. This, it seemed, was the smoking gun. You remember the whole thing, right? To understand the full importance of the story and how much Putin and his Kremlin cronies must have been dancing with delight, I have to quote the top few paragraphs. And this, I guess, is the top few paragraphs of the supposed email. In a major revelation from the second batch of WikiLeaks emails from Clinton I guess this is Sputnik. I'm sorry. Well, at least I figured it out. Everyone should do a better job about labeling where their links are from. In a major revelation from the second batch of WikiLeaks emails from Clinton campaign chair John Podesta, it was learned that Hillary's top confidant, Sidney Blumenthal, believed that the investigation into Benghazi was legitimate because it was preventable and the result of State Department negligence. In an email titled The Truth from Hillary's top confidant, Sidney Blumenthal, the advisor writing to undisclosed recipients said that one important point that has been universally acknowledged by 9 previous reports about Benghazi, the attack was almost certainly preventable. And I guess this is supposed to be, what may turn out to be the big October surprise from the WikiLeaks release of emails hacked from the account of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta. Then came the money quote. They know the phrase money quote there in Sputnik. Quote, Clinton was in charge of the State Department, and it failed to protect U.S. personnel at an American consulate in Libya. If the GOP wants to raise that as a talking point against her, it is legitimate, said Blumenthal, says Sputnik, putting to rest the Democratic Party talking point that the investigation into Clinton's management of the State Department at the time of the attack was nothing more than a partisan witch hunt. In other words, Sputnik is printing what they claim is the news supported by a hacked email found and released by WikiLeaks that Sidney Blumenthal has written to John Podesta to say, you got to give up. The truth is the Republicans are right about Benghazi and you are wrong. I just wanted to advise you of that. And Sputnik believes that they have uncovered exactly that. WikiLeaks believes, I guess, that they have uncovered exactly that. But there was a problem. And now Kurt Eichenwald takes back over. Those words sounded really, really familiar. Really familiar. Like so familiar that they struck me as something I wrote. Because they were something I wrote. The Russians were quoting 2 sentences from a 10,000-word piece that I wrote for Newsweek, which Blumenthal had emailed to Podesta. Okay. There was no mistaking that Blumenthal was citing Newsweek. The magazine's name and citations for photographs appeared throughout the attached article. The Russians had carefully selected the "of course" paragraph. Which one was that? I don't even know. What do you mean the "of course" paragraph? Okay. Well, anyway, I guess there is one. The Russians had carefully selected the "of course" paragraph, which mentions that there were legitimate points of criticism regarding Clinton and Benghazi, all of which had been acknowledged in 9 reports about the attack and by the former Secretary of State herself. But that was hardly the point of the story. The story entitled Benghazi Biopsy, a comprehensive guide to one of America's worst political outrages. The piece is about the obscene politicization of the assault that killed 4 Americans, and the article slammed the Republican Benghazi Committee, which was engaged in a political show trial, which Russians love, disguised as a congressional investigation, the 10th inquiry into the tragedy. Here is the real summation of my article, which the Russians failed to quote. The historical significance of this moment can hardly be overstated, and it seems many Republicans, Democrats, and members of the media don't fully understand the magnitude of what is taking place. The awesome power of government, one that allows officials to pour through almost anything they demand and compel anyone to talk or suffer the shame of taking the Fifth Amendment, which isn't supposed to be a shame, but it's the way it works out, has been unleashed for purely political purposes. By the way, imagine putting it in Trump's hands. It is impossible to review what the Benghazi Committee has done as anything other than taxpayer-funded political research of the opposing party's leading candidate for president. Comparisons from America's past are rare. Richard Nixon's attempt to use the IRS to investigate his perceived enemies comes to mind. And, of course, Richard Nixon's impeachment count for attempting to jail his political opponents, etc. So does Senator Joseph McCarthy's red baiting during the 1950s, with reckless accusations of treason leveled at members of the State Department, military generals, and even secretaries of the Army. And that's what should give you pause, really, in thinking through or evaluating all of this that gets blamed on the Russians. I mean, it does seem a little old-timey, to be saying, really? The Russians are doing everything? Okay. I mean, they could be, but I don't know. It just seems it should give you pause. I don't see why you can't just say that, right? Okay. I got to scroll back here. I thought I had grabbed something from the Twitter stream that would make a great story for later, and I looked up, and I guess I went to click on it, the thing I wanted, and it had shifted on the screen, and I ended up clicking the wrong thing. Don't you hate when that happens? People continue talking on Twitter, and they mess up your clicking. Okay. So there's the red baiting from McCarthy, which makes you think, maybe I should slow down a little bit on this stuff. The consequences, however, are worse than the manipulation of the electoral process. By using Benghazi for political advantage, the Republicans have communicated to global militants that, through even limited attacks involving relatively few casualties, they can potentially influence the direction of American elections. And that's not too close. All right. Well, let's see. Oh, I got a note here from Karen. Karen D is the name, but of course it's matched up with the Twitter handle KARESF. Is that maybe San Francisco? Is that your nickname, Kar? Maybe that makes some sense. But this is my Russian pronunciation's not close. With a smile. That's usually a frown when I'm not close. Well, anyway, I guess if we try to give it some more borscht-y body, and we could say Russia instead of Rosia. Yeah, what's the name of the... Oh, well. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I didn't take much in the way of Russian at any point, so I don't have any basis from which to do this except movie accents. And maybe that's not so good. Anyway, in case you were wondering about how I did with that, I did poorly. Okay. Of course, this is another of course paragraph, I guess. Not the one that he was referring to before, but a new of course paragraph. Kurt Eichenwald says, of course, this might be seen as just an opportunity to laugh at the incompetence of Russian hackers and government press. Once they realized their error, Sputnik took the article down, but then things got even more bizarre. This false story was reported only by the Russian-controlled agency. A reference appeared to it in a Turkish publication, but it was nothing but a link to the Sputnik article. Am I supposed to be trying to pronounce that too? Is that Sputnik rather than Sputnik? Anyway, I wasn't really trying a great deal with the Sputnik thing. Maybe I'll do it some. Let's put on the Russian movie accent. Why not? So, how did Donald Trump end up advancing the same falsehood put out by Putin's mouthpiece? And this is another point of some contention. I am watching a Twitter battle take place before my very eyes between Eichenwald and his doubters, who are many and chiefly come from what I will call the Glenn Greenwald camp. Glenn Greenwald seems particularly invested in, we'll put this kindly, in reminding people that the right wing historically and incorrectly in many cases, scared the crap out of people and unduly influenced American public policy for decades with red scaring and red baiting. So, whenever you find yourself having to say that everything that's going wrong is going wrong because of intricate Russian plots, you should have just about plots at that point, and you want to take a step back and evaluate. And I think I've seen some plausible criticism from out of this situation of Eichenwald, and I don't know, he's not taking it all that well either. So that raises some concerns for me. Anyway, his explanation of it, Eichenwald's explanation of it, says that this disinformation existed only in this Sputnik article. So how did Donald Trump end up getting it and reading it in time for Wilkes-Barre? In time to read it aloud at Wilkes-Barre? Well, at this rally, Trump spoke while holding the document in his hand. He told the assembled crowd that it was an email from Blumenthal, whom he called Sleazy Sidney. You remember that? This came out just a little while ago, Trump said. I have to tell you this. And then he read the words from my article. He's now admitting, Trump says, that they could have done something about Benghazi, dropping the document to the floor. This just came out a little while ago, and then they go into the lock her up thing. This is not funny. Eichenwald says, this is terrifying. The Russians engage in a sloppy disinformation effort, and before the day is out, the Republican nominee for president is standing on a stage reciting the manufactured story as truth. If so, that is troublesome. How did it happen? Who in the Trump campaign is feeding him falsehoods straight from the Kremlin? The Trump campaign did not respond to a request for comment. But I got to tell you, I mean, even as I read this, I don't think I get the idea that metaphorically it makes some sense to say, well, who in the Trump campaign is feeding him falsehood straight from the Kremlin? And it's like, well, as a metaphor it works, but is it straight from the Kremlin or is he just reading it on a website? I mean, you just said it was on Sputnik, which is an online news source. It may very well be Russian propaganda. What do I know? But, to me, like, are there alt-right types who really enjoy Sputnik News because they're putting out, even if it's not about influencing the election per se, but is Russian government-directed propaganda, right? What are they going to put there? Of course they're going to put things that are nettlesome or that undermine the presumed next president of the United States. I mean, our relationship hasn't thawed that much that they're not going to relish doing that. And then, I don't know, the idea that it takes some kind of special relationship to take words directly from the Kremlin and put them on paper and give them to Donald Trump. I guess if it's on like a teletype, maybe, but it seems pretty, I don't know. I would prefer, I think, to stick to what is the more likely actual mechanical scenario, which is, okay, Sputnik, let's say they say, let's print this because it's propaganda, and they do. Let's just start with that assumption because we've got to start somewhere. I don't understand what makes you think Donald Trump read it even. I mean, I am sure that somebody on staff who reads this regularly read it and said, great, unquestioningly, fantastic, let's use this. This is just the kind of stuff I've come to depend on Sputnik for providing. Even if I know it's garbage. We can even assume that. And then he gives it to Donald Trump. So, all right. And okay, if Sputnik is I've given up on the pronunciation, by the way. If Sputnik is a state agency, then clearly the news, whether real or imagined, is going to be coming from the Russian government. Yes, but I mean, since when are the Russians not putting out propaganda in the form of news, hoping that we would read it and use it? Since when is anybody not putting out propaganda, hoping somebody else will read it and use it? That doesn't surprise me. So it does. I guess I don't know. This doesn't seem outside of the hacking. The hacking, that seems like, well, it's probably true that everybody's been trying to do that for a long time, too. But I guess they've just had more success with it these days than they ever used to. But it doesn't seem like the game has changed all that much. All right. Eichenwald continues this way. The Russians have been obtaining American emails and now are presenting complete misrepresentations of them, falsifying them, in hopes of setting off a cascade of events that might change the outcome of the presidential election. The big question, of course, again, is why are the Russians working so hard to damage Clinton and in the process aid Donald Trump? That is a topic for another time. It's my current topic. Again, I'll just say they're working hard to damage Clinton because they think she's going to be the next president. I don't even really know that they care to elect Donald Trump, though certainly we hear lots of stories about the alignment between Vladimir Putin's preferences and what appear to be Donald Trump's, and they may very well have something to do with a business relationship. We'll never know because we'll never see his taxes, and even if we do, that's the sort of activity that's not likely to be filed in your taxes. That is a legitimate possibility. The fact that he has developments in Russia is a cause for concern. No doubt about it. Greater than has ever been the case with any other presidential nominee of either party ever. It's just never been the case that somebody has had multiple millions of dollars invested in Moscow and throughout Russia and been dependent on the Russian government, as any developer would be doing anything in Russia. You would absolutely be dependent on the good graces of the Russian government and in its current form, the Russian oligarchs to get that business done. So, I mean, it's not like we could swap out a democratic investor in Russia and say it's going to be fine, but we don't have that because there just aren't that many running, and none of them are running for president as far as I know. Anyway, so the big question is, why are they working so hard to damage Clinton? Because she'll be the American president, and that's the kind of person they damage. For now, though, Americans should be outraged, says Eichenwald. This totalitarian regime engaged in what are arguably war crimes in Syria. Yes, there's more to that story, of course. To protect its government puppet, is working to upend a democracy to the benefit of an American candidate who uttered positive comments just Sunday about the Kremlin's campaign on behalf of Bashar al-Assad. Trump's arguments, well, okay. You can just say, hey, it's Putin, and think that's bad enough all by itself. Trump's arguments were an incomprehensible explication of the complex Syrian situation, which put him right on the side of the Iranians and Syrians who are fighting to preserve the government that is the primary conduit of weapons used against Israel. And that's not going to make people who are not fans of Israel any more worried, I'm sure. So, no, Mr. Putin, I'm not Sidney Blumenthal, and now that you've been exposed once again, get the hell out of our election. And Mr. Trump, you have some explaining to do. I don't know. I am not so sure that that is the worrisome, the most worrisome case to be made here. And I guess neither is blue strike through green DuPage, who continues, I guess, to listen along, despite the fact that I guess, I don't know, it must drive him crazy every day to hear me talking about the election. But okay, it's good to know that you're still sticking by us here. Let's see. Washington Post. So I'm going to have to quick pocket this thing because I still haven't gone ahead and subscribed to the damn Washington Post, and I really ought to. And I think I just am going to give in on that one, and I'm going to take everybody else's lead on this and subscribe and say it's strictly because of David Farenthold's work. And it really is. Mostly because I click on 10 David Farenthold articles very quickly in any given month. So it literally is because of David Farenthold that I am going to subscribe, not because I'm super generous with my support of that particular newspaper or any newspaper and their pay model, though you really have to be because people got to get paid for this stuff. But because David Farenthold eats up my allowance all the time, and it really is his fault that I have to subscribe. But to put a positive spin on it, I would say they got to pay a lot of people at the Washington Post, and they've been doing some good work. And even the people who are doing crappy work need to get paid too. And since people have given me money to help run this show, I will give some of that money to the Washington Post because they help populate this show. So that makes sense. It's just time to pay. Okay. By the same token, you should all pay me. That's true. But it doesn't feel good to say so. Okay. But this is the article that Green DuPage, it's difficult to keep up with these things, has pointed me to. Philip Bump, the Trump-Putin link that wasn't. And it's in the fix. And I got to tell you, not a huge fan of what gets printed in the fix, though more so others who write at the fix than Chris Cillizza, certainly. And I guess, to be honest, ordinarily I don't think Green DuPage is either. But, politics makes for strange bedfellows. I don't think it ought to be dismissed for that reason. Ready? This tweet, retweeted thousands of times, is at best misleading, and it is a Kurt Eichenwald tweet. Russia government falsified an email. Then Trump recited the falsified email at a rally. Only those two knew it. How? Now, there's two elements to this email, and I guess saying it's at best misleading is fair enough. I've seen worse said about the email. And there's 2 points to be extracted from this whole story. And one is, it does still, even with all my skepticism, appear to me that what happened here is somewhere along the line in the chain of custody, somebody cobbled together what was ultimately a falsified email. There wasn't an email from Sidney Blumenthal to John Podesta titled The Truth that said essentially, they got us dead to rights. We did the Benghazi. We should be booked for murder. That email was never going to be written. And for somebody to say, I found that email, is beyond ridiculous. But the other question is this question of Trump. Only Trump and Putin's government knew that this email, this fake email, existed, and the only reason Donald Trump could possibly be in possession of it would be if the only way it could have happened is if he had gotten it directly from them. But I don't think that that's the case, and let's go find out why Philip Bump thinks so. Kurt Eichenwald is a reporter and writer who has been dogged in looking at Donald Trump over the course of the campaign. True, it was Eichenwald who reported that Trump had apparently violated the Cuban embargo in the 1990s, and who has written about a number of investigations into Trump's business ties. That is also true. And I will say this, he has been giving David Fahrenthold a run for his money in terms of being Johnny on the spot with a lot of the hottest Trump hits, by which I mean hits against Trump. And even that is a little bit odd, to be honest. Every single scoop, really, for the last week, and that's why I was sort of wondering about this one, too. The link in the tweet above, that is Eichenwald's tweet about how did he know about this thing, goes to another article in Newsweek that outlines how Trump gave a rally crowd in Pennsylvania on Monday night incorrect information that Eichenwald traced back to Russian intelligence. But that's shortening up the timeline in the misleading way that Eichenwald does in his tweet. In reality, the only proved issue is that Trump will happily pick up any news off the internet and broadcast it to the world, accurate or not. And that, by the way, I'll add, that's quite dangerous enough. Thank you very much. But might as well clear this up. The timeline of what happened is easy to reconstruct. On Monday evening, WikiLeaks released a new batch of emails that appear to have been hacked from the account of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. Why anybody would believe they appeared to be hacked from there when you see the contents of this email, I don't know, but somebody must have said that's what they were. WikiLeaks. These hacks have been tied to the Russian government by the United States intelligence community. How? I don't know. They can't tell you, or they'd have to kill you. So you just got to decide whether you're going to believe it or not. One of the emails ended up at a website called Sputnik News. Sputnik, as we have noted before, was founded by and is still funded by the Russian government with the apparent goal of bolstering its worldview internationally, not unlike the idea that Mike Pence had about starting news agencies controlled by the state of Indiana in Indiana, but he was eventually talked out of it because someone said, "Are you crazy? That's so Soviet, you'll look like an idiot." And he said, "Oh, dang." That said, Sputnik has a reasonably large audience. 1 million people like it on Facebook. Okay. And nearly 200,000 follow it on Twitter. Oh, okay. I see where we're going with this one. Sputnik writes and publishes articles about things in the news, often with a Russia-friendly slant. That's, I think, what we ought to expect from them. At about 5 p.m. Eastern on Monday, Sputnik ran its article on an email from the Podesta dump that appears to have come from longtime Clinton ally Sidney Blumenthal. The timing can be determined by the timestamp on the article, which is 7 hours ahead of Eastern Time in the United States. And here's the garbage email. The attack was almost certainly preventable. Sputnik reports Blumenthal writing to Podesta about the terrorist attacks in Benghazi. Clinton was in charge of the State Department and had failed to protect U.S. personnel at an American consulate in Libya. But Sputnik either misread or misrepresented the contents of the email. So that's still true, even according to Bump. The original makes clear that Blumenthal was passing along a news article from Newsweek by Eichenwald and not sharing his own thoughts. In fact, the original email suggests that Blumenthal was passing along the article because it mentions himself, if for no other reason. That might be how he came up with it, probably with a Google search for his own name. This isn't a falsification of the email, as Eichenwald puts it, since the email is there in the batch. In the most charitable interpretation, it's a sloppy misreading of it. Really? And does it not have the full... If it doesn't have the full body of the... Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe Sidney Blumenthal did at some point write an email to John Podesta including only part of an Eichenwald article. Although I'd be shocked if, for any reason, he titled it The Truth. That seems unlikely. The Truth. Why? I mean, I think that's probably something he reserves for himself to judge, but okay. I don't know. I disagree that it isn't a falsification if the email has been clipped in any way, and that's the claim here. Anyway, it's also a sloppy misreading of it. Perhaps realizing that, Sputnik pulled the article at some point, and at about 6 p.m. Eastern, Trump was scheduled to take the stage at a rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. During his speech, he pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket and said, "This just came out a little while ago." This appears to have been the alleged confession by Blumenthal that was misreported by Sputnik. The crowd, as Eichenwald notes, began to boo Hillary Clinton. How could Trump have gotten that? He could have gotten a secret message from a KGB agent posing as a hot dog vendor in the rally area. The two surreptitiously meeting after Trump gave the appropriate hand signal, although how the other agent would have spotted his hands, I have no idea. Or maybe one of his allies who follows Sputnik saw the article and was like, "Hey, Donald, check this out." Yeah, I think so. There's a great deal of evidence suggesting that Russia is pulling what levers are in reach to aid the candidacy of Trump. There's evidence that Russia hacked Podesta's emails and in some way passed them along to WikiLeaks. We know Russia publishes Sputnik News, but we don't know that there's any direct link between the Russian government and the Trump campaign, and this article from Eichenwald, his suggestive tweets notwithstanding, does not prove there is. What should cause alarm in this situation is another facet of what happened. It's not that Trump is a Putin marionette, though I guess he could still be, and that would be worrisome, but it's that he seems to have pulled bad information off a questionable website and presented it on live television to an audience of thousands without skepticism. This is an indictment of his judgment, not of his loyalty. Not conclusively of his loyalty, that's true. But it's a slightly less splashy headline. And there's an update here. BuzzFeed News' John Passatino notes on Twitter that the Sputnik article may not even have been the source of Trump's comments. It may have been a tweet from earlier in the day, which included the precise language Trump read. I guess that could be too. Well, even so. Okay. Let's see. And one more note here from Green DuPage. The actual email in question, as published by WikiLeaks and distorted by Sputnik, cites Eichenwald. Okay, so it's the actual email. I guess that would remove some of the blame then from WikiLeaks if the citation, if there's something in there that says, hey, here's an article from Kurt Eichenwald in Newsweek, that's certainly a lot more believable, although honestly, I would love to know where the title of The Truth came from. The idea that Sidney Blumenthal is such a huge fan of Kurt Eichenwald's writing, there are a lot of reasons to be a fan of Kurt Eichenwald, I guess, but the idea that you would be such a fan of his writing that you would say, now here's an article that he wrote. Man, I'm going to put this subject line, The Truth, like capitalized, The Truth. That seems, again, unlikely. But anyway, I certainly don't have any further answers on this. It's all speculation from me at this point, but I want to put that out there because a lot of people talking about the latest article, because Eichenwald has done a great job dropping a lot of bombshells one after the other, and so like with David Farenthold, everyone was waiting for the next Eichenwald piece, and he does a terrific job on Twitter promoting it. He loves to come on there and say, oh, I'm publishing a piece in a couple hours, you're not going to believe it. And then he drops this one, and I don't know. This one didn't seem to do it for me. So I wanted to put that out there because I'm sure a lot of people are talking about it. And I think that there's still a lot of emotions running high on this stuff, and a lot of people who are pretty convinced that the Russians are up to something terrible and all this. And I don't disagree, but as a service to you, we'll spend a little bit of time in a comfortable space, a safe space here on the Kagro in the Morning Show, discussing how far do you want to let that article, the latest Eichenwald piece, take you. Don't let it, take it for what it's worth and no more. And realize that if you're going further than that, you're speculating. Speculation's okay. It would be irresponsible in many cases not to speculate. Just realize that it's speculation. Give yourself room to back up and back out if you find out that your information is bad or that the chain of custody calls it all into question. That, I think, should be standard practice for everyone. Okay. Other fun things that we ought to add to the discussion today. Man, I'm telling you, I'm so tempted to go down the route of all this other background information I'm finding about this article that I'm going to share with you tomorrow. I feel like Kurt Eichenwald teasing you with what's coming up tomorrow, but we're just going to have to wait, and it doesn't make any sense to bust these things out before you have the backgrounder from tomorrow. But I got a pocket inside pocket full of things, and I feel like it's starting to worry me. I'm going to end up with an office like John Nash with clippings pasted to my wall and strings leading from one to the other. The more reading I do about the people involved in the various, I don't know what to call them except sex rings, that keeps coming up on my show, and I'm starting to feel like Alex Jones here. It's amazing, and it's great fodder for conspiracy theory, and that's what worries me most about it, is that I would indulge in that. But I go from article to article, reading things, and then 2 days later I'll say, oh my gosh, a name comes up in a different article in a slightly different context, and I say, that's the link between this bit of the story and that bit, or potentially anyway, and can I check that out, and can I find out, do these people definitely know each other? Did these people ever hang out together? Did these people ever work on a project together? It's getting nuts out there. And as I was pondering up at the top of the show, even before Greg came on, there are other plausible explanations for these things. Much like this Kurt Eichenwald thing. The idea that it came directly from the Kremlin as opposed to Sputnik printed this thing. And there are many, many unbalanced weirdos working for Donald Trump who no doubt monitor Sputnik. And it's not even much of a one-off for what Philip Bump said. Oh, well, it might have come from a tweet that somebody else did. Well, yeah, but it almost certainly would have come from a tweet of somebody, let's say, taking a screenshot of Sputnik's report and attaching it as a picture to their tweet, and then they printed that out. It tells me almost nothing to remind me that it might have come from a tweet. That would just be, okay, so somebody else, instead of reading Sputnik in the office and then printing it out and handing it to Donald Trump, read it somewhere else and sent it to Donald Trump via Twitter instead. That is to say nothing at all, and that the chain of custody is no better, no more solid, nor more doubtful than simply saying somebody on the campaign read it and gave it to him, or that he read it himself. Though I don't believe he'd be able to operate a printer. So there's that. Okay, let's see. Other fun things that we might toss in there. Well, just to get back to the actual business of the rest of the election. I mentioned to Greg earlier on that Mark Gersh at NCEC, the National Committee for an Effective Congress, has reviewed and renewed his House prediction numbers, and the hope is it was tough for this week because we're going to be short by at least the one day to get him on here to talk about this, but maybe we ought to wait and see whether a week and some more polling and some more post-debate polling change his thinking even further. But I'll read to you what he's got here from his Friday, October 7th prediction at the ncec.org site. Expect Democrats to win 10 to 20 of these House seats, and maybe we ought to find out which ones they are. In August, we presented a number of congressional districts that could contribute to a wave election in 2016. And we read that article, I believe, and we had Mark on to discuss it then. The ensuing weeks have brought an increasingly close presidential contest, and then it's spaced out a little bit more, and the congressional battleground has crystallized. Democrats need to win 30 seats in November for a new House majority. Right now, our outlook for Democratic gains this year remains unchanged, between 10 and 20 seats. All right. In the summer, Donald Trump became the Republican nominee, and his presence has figured to impact the House races in a dramatic and dichotomous way. Put very simply, Mr. Trump is likely to help Republicans in economically downscale and rural districts, while suburban voters, especially women, are likely to generate gains for Democrats in several states. With the election only 5 weeks away, other fundamentals of the battle for House control remain the same. Republican gains have reached a ceiling, undoing the impact of redistricting, higher turnout in a presidential election, and open seat contests. The landscape, he says, favors Democrats. Republicans started the cycle far more vulnerable than Democrats due to their 68-seat net gain over the 2010, 12, and 14 cycles. In that period, they amassed their largest House majority in almost a century. Democrats have been relishing this scenario all year. With very few battlegrounds to defend, they are almost assured a pickup of at least a handful of seats. The outlook is so favorable, it is possible that every Democratic incumbent running for re-election might win this November. At this time, there are only 3 in jeopardy, and they are, by the way, Nebraska's 2nd District, Brad Ashford, California's 7th, where Ami Bera is in the incumbent, and Minnesota's 8th District, Rick Nolan. Favorable redistricting decisions up next. Court decisions related to redistricting in Florida and Virginia have resulted in new district maps in those states. The decisions have benefited Democrats, potentially delivering a net gain of at least 3 seats. We previously noted that Democrats will lose in Florida's 2nd District while picking up seats in Florida's 10th, 13th, and Virginia's 4th districts. It now appears that Florida's 7th district could also change hands as a result of the redrawn map. That means almost 1/4 of potential Democratic gains would be due to redistricting alone. What districts again and who occupies those seats? In Florida, the 7th, 10th, and 13th are held respectively by John Mica, Dan Webster, and David Jolly. Virginia's 4th district by Randy Forbes. Now, Republicans in majority Democratic districts up next. The presidential year electorate is far more diverse and far younger than in midterm elections. Almost 32 million more voters cast major party House ballots in 2012 than they did in 2014. Republicans must defend 8 seats they gained in 2014 that are at least 50% Democratic and where lower turnout led to the seat changing hands. The freshmen in many of these districts that lean Democratic in presidential years could be unseated this year. Who are they? Florida's 26th District, Carlos Curbelo. Iowa's 1st District, Rod Blum. Illinois' 10th, Bob Dole. Maine's 2nd District, Bruce Poliquin. New Hampshire's 1st District, Frank Guinta. Nevada, thank you very much, 04, we're talking about Crescent Hardy. I don't believe I've ever come across that name before. New York 24, John Katko, and Texas 23, Will Hurd, H-U-R-D. What about contests without an incumbent? open seats. Open seats in any election provide critical pickup opportunities, and this year is no different. In districts without an established incumbent, the presidential contest may determine which party wins these open seats. Democrats are at an advantage here as well, with only 2 currently held open seats in jeopardy. Those would be Arizona's 1st and Florida's 18th. Boy, Florida is just going to go up in smoke. The expanded Republican majority leaves them vulnerable in marginal districts vacated by Republican incumbents. This group can be divided into 3 segments. Suburban districts, where the presidential race helps the Democratic candidate. Lower middle class, largely white district where Trump is not a liability, and the electorate is divided almost equally between Republicans and Democrats. And Republican-leaning districts likely to be retained by the Republicans, barring a Trump implosion, which ought not to be barred. In those 3 categories, remember the suburban presidential year Democratic-leaning districts, we have Minnesota's 2nd district, where Ron Klein is retiring, and Pennsylvania's 8th district, where Mike Fitzpatrick is retiring. Those lower middle class, largely white, equally Democratic and Republican, indifferent to Trump districts include Michigan's 1st, Dan Benishek's current district, Nevada's 3rd district, where Joe Heck is retiring from the House to run for the Senate, and New York's 19th district, where Chris Gibson is leaving the House. Republican-leaning districts, barring Trump implosion, are 1, 2, 3, 4. Indiana's 9th district, where Todd Young, likewise, is running for the Senate. Pennsylvania's 16th, Joe Pitts on his way out the door. Virginia's 5th district, where Robert Hurt is, I guess, also retiring. Is he really? Wow. And Wisconsin's 8th, Reed Ribble, whose name I have never believed to be real in the first place. Then moving on to vulnerable Republican incumbents. There are some. Next comes that critical group of suburban Republican incumbents who may win re-election despite the negative fallout from the Trump campaign. They represent districts that are largely upscale demographically, but are still subject to defeat given a Trump implosion at the top of the ticket. And it doesn't look like they can avoid that. Let's see, how many of them are there? Well, that looks like it's the bulk of them. Arizona's 2nd, Martha McSally. And there's notes about each one if you'd like to go in depth on these things. What about Martha McSally, the Republican incumbent? The top of the ticket here will have a huge impact. McSally won the closest House contest in the nation in 2014. She has since solidified her support level, but Trump could undermine it. California's 49th, Darrell Issa. I never remember that. I will never, ever remember that. Let's see. There, a substantial Asian American population and highly educated white voters signal trouble for the incumbent. The top Democratic recruit, retired Marine Douglas Applegate, also looms. Asian Americans coming out strong against Trump in the last couple of weeks. Mike Kaufman's district, Colorado 6th, Denver exurbs. Kaufman has refused to endorse Trump. Popular State Representative Morgan Carroll is a formidable challenger in a rapidly changing Arapahoe County-based district. David Young in Iowa's 3rd district, another 2014 winner, who owes his success to a Republican wave rather than aberrational turnout. Polls show he may lose this year. Kansas's 3rd district, Kevin Yoder, an upscale Kansas City-based district with a staunchly conservative incumbent in one of the most highly educated districts in the country. Congratulations. Minnesota's 3rd district, Eric Paulson. What's up with him? Highly educated Twin Cities suburbs. Trump could lose this district by 15 points. New Jersey's 5th district, Scott Garrett, an upscale New York City suburban area sprinkled with emerging exurbs. New York's 1st district, Lee Zeldin, a 50-50 district in Long Island where Trump is popular at present. Zeldin is another 2014 freshman who capitalized on an ethical lapse by a former Democratic incumbent. That magic may be gone. Virginia's 10th district, right here at home, Barbara Comstock. Hooray! Comstock has refused to endorse Trump outwardly, but she may not survive in the upscale Virginia suburbs and exurbs where Trump may have difficulty winning even 45% of the vote. Not his turf, where I live. Emerging Hispanic constituencies Our next and last category, minority turnout. Remember them? That'll be a big indicator of Democratic success in this election. A large Hispanic turnout, fueled by the Trump campaign, might upend Republican incumbents in these 3 California districts. The 10th, Jeff Denham, the Republican incumbent. The 21st, where David Valadao is incumbent, and the 25th district, Steve Knight. What's up in the 10th? More than 27% of the citizen voting age population in the 10th district is Latino. In the 21st, President Obama carried this district in both 2008, when he got 52.5% of the vote, and 2012, where it went up to 55.7% of the vote, expanding his vote share from 2008 to 2012. Not easily done everywhere, and it looks to be on the upswing still. And then Steve Knight's 25th district, the Hispanic share of the citizen voting age population in the 25th district grew by 3.5% between 2010 and 2014 and has continued. It's only getting bigger. All of this means that Democrats will gain seats, probably 10 to 20. Splitting the difference, a gain of 15 seats, would be a positive outcome, given the paucity of marginal districts as a result of redistricting vagaries. So, another conservative estimate, and we'll have to see whether new polling results give any hope for additional seats if we can get a chance to talk to Mark Gersh perhaps next week. I don't know. I will say this. The presidential race certainly does impact down ticket races, but in filtering down, I think the effect is watered down. The further down the ballot you go, the more watered down the effect tends to be, and it just falls off on the way down. And in many cases, all it takes is for the Republican contestant there to say, well, I'm not Donald Trump, or I don't support, or that thing which you hate about Donald Trump is also insupportable in my view. And people say, okay, that's all I needed to hear in order to justify this to myself. And then also just people sort of tend to forget somehow that these guys go together, that they're a team, that it's a package deal, and that ultimately, most often, these Republicans do, in fact, not only are voting for Trump, even if they say they don't support him, but when push comes to shove, if they're presented policy proposals from a Republican White House, that's just where they're going to go and where they're going to put their trust. Okay, so summing up the last few minutes, we can cram in a few more things to watch. I'll report this one. Vanity Fair, with this tweet, I'll have to throw this in pocket so I can give it to Scott, says Billy Bush might be the one that leaked that Trump video himself, which would be very, very curious. Maybe we ought to just go and take a quick look at that. I wonder, does that mean, what if he did? Would we say, yeah, put him back on the Today Show? Or would we say, well, you've made amends for your bad behavior in 2005, but I don't know if I want to see you back on the Today Show. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what this has to say. Why do they say this? Billy Bush might be to blame for that Trump video leak. Page 6 alleges that the beleaguered Today host brazenly bragged to NBC staff about the vulgar Donald Trump tape while covering the Olympics in Rio. Now, it may not be that he released it himself, but he may have put them onto the scent, perhaps. How interesting is that? Let's see if we can't run through that, and then we'll tell you what's going on in the after show after this. As the dust begins to settle around the, P-word grab heard round the world, as they put it, a few questions remain unanswered. First of all, why did it take until last Friday for a tape of Donald Trump bragging about coming on to a married woman and groping whomever he wanted? And when you're a star that you do it, you can do anything. Why did it take it so long to leak? And who exactly is behind the tape's sudden leap into the public sphere? The answer may surprise you. According to page 6, That is, I guess, its own standalone publication these days. The person responsible for Trump's catastrophic October surprise might very well be Billy Bush himself, the hapless Today Show host who was escorting Trump to a shoot for Bush's old show, Access Hollywood, when the Republican candidate made his now notorious comments into a microphone he didn't realize was recording his every word. I don't know why, but okay. The New York Post's gossip section, that's page 6, alleges that Bush boasted at a party in August that he had a tape of Trump being a real dog, prompting staffers at Access Hollywood to track it down. The rest, as they say, is history. Neither Bush nor Today has yet responded to Vanity Fair's request for comment. This story adds another layer to the CNN report from Friday, which claimed that an Access Hollywood producer decided to go digging for the Trump tape on Monday, as Trump's sexist comments about former Miss Universe Alicia Machado and ex-Apprentice colleagues were making waves. Once the hot mic tape was discovered, Access Hollywood began preparing a segment about Trump's comments that it planned to run after Sunday's debate. But their timeline sped up when someone gave the footage to David Fahrenthold of the Washington Post. Perhaps an inadvertent tip from Bush himself helped spur that initial search, though according to page 6's insider, he never told his new bosses at NBC News about the tape. And if he remembered the full extent of such an explosive conversation with a presidential candidate and didn't disclose that to NBC News, that is a very, very serious problem. It certainly won't help endear Bush to his Today Show colleagues, who have reportedly turned on their coworker, as he turned on his, I guess. Bush has been suspended indefinitely from the morning show, replaced by Carson Daly in the meantime. Does he have time for that? Okay. And rumor has it that the majority of today's other bold-faced names, the famous people on page 6, aren't exactly gunning for his return. A source told People Monday that Tamron Hall and Al Roker have both given Bush the cold shoulder. Page 6 adds that Kathy Lee Gifford is also in the anti-Bush camp. She doesn't even want Bush to throw the show to her, as they say, and co-host Hoda. I don't watch Kathy Lee Gifford's show. There's a Hoda Kotb. You tell me. She has. That's interesting. She has Jesus in her life and feels this is just not right. We're told. Well, okay. When reached for comment yesterday, a Today source told Vanity Fair that the anchors and hosts of the show have a good relationship with Billy Bush and that the show's staff is comfortable with how the situation is being handled. Well, I guess so. Okay. Well, interesting. That would really be a remarkable sort of turn of events. It's time now, of course, to play our outro music and get ready to tell you what's going on the after show. I did have another bit about this somewhere, and I guess we can also spend some time, not tomorrow, because we'll be talking about trafficking tomorrow, and not live at that, but later in the week, about the existence of additional footage and unused footage from The Apprentice, and who the hell controls that stuff. Mark Burnett is playing kind of a coy game, insisting he does not have the ability to release those tapes, even if he wanted to, because they're owned by MGM Television now, except in the deal that made MGM Television the owner of The Apprentice tapes, Mark Burnett became the president of MGM Television. But hey, he can't just act unilaterally. Perhaps. I don't know. We'll find out. But perhaps later in the week. What about later in the day? Do stay tuned, of course, for the after show, which comes up next. That's why it's called the after show. British Petroleum CEO Bob Dudley says the company is a little bit saddened by the Deepwater Horizon movie. Oh, that's too bad. A black-owned and operated Portland, Oregon cupcake shop is accused of racism against blacks by white liberal scolds. They might not be right. We'll have to find out about that. And as the Creepy Clown, and that's trademark, franchise moves overseas now, malevolent mimes have been frightening French schoolchildren since before the storming of the Bastille. Those bastard mimes. Okay, there's more, of course, coming up on the last half, which I'll tell you about right after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
It's all about Kansas and Missouri as Chris Reeves, a.k.a. Tom Servo 433, joins in to talk about the Kansas predatory lender scandal. Vile, sexist white men are a growth industry in the Kansas and Missouri GOP, and the debate in Kansas over whether God sent Trump like the harlots or as the incubus. Stay tuned.